Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, oil, but in a place you'd not usually think of. We're looking at Puntland, one of the poorest regions in Africa. But could oil change all that? We talked to one of the men who's drilling for black gold. Also, real estate in Kabul, much more in demand than you might think, but as ever, the bubble has to burst at some point. And we visit the London High Street store where you can walk in and buy a private jet. Recession, austerity, apparently not for all. All that plus an interview with the World Bank on its latest growth forecasts, and surprise, surprise, they're not good. But we want to start in a region of Africa which is hoping to see just how transformational and powerful natural resources can be to a struggling economy. We're talking Puntland and we're talking oil. It might just be that this autonomous region of northern Somalia has found the source of its own renewal, or potentially a curse, as such riches can often be. What's for sure is that for the first time in 20 years, companies are drilling for oil in Puntland. Here it is on the map, Puntland in the Horn of Africa, and specifically two large blocks of oil there called the Dahrua Valley and Nogal Valley blocks. They are sizable, 36,000 square kilometres combined, which is around the size of the island of Taiwan. And beneath the ground, an estimated 19 billion barrels of oil. Now, not all of it is recoverable, but remember, oil's easily over $100 a barrel, so a basic calculation gives us a potential $2 trillion to be made. Compare that to the size of the Puntland economy on its own, just $5.9 billion in 2010, with a meagre average income per capita of just $600. Now, just to put the region in some context, Puntland's been a semi-autonomous region in Somalia since 1998. It was formed in response to the collapse of the government and the ongoing civil war in the south. It has been calm recently compared to the lawless south, but illegal fishing, dumping and piracy along the coast are a barrier to progress. Though you might remember from last week's Counting the Cost, we did report on how piracy money had in fact helped the region, which has little in the way of infrastructure or industry. Oil, though, could offer the real jobs and revenue the region does desperately need. Now, one of the companies drilling for oil is Australia's Range Resources. And we've got its Executive Director, Peter Landau, joining us from Perth in Western Australia this week. Peter, thank you for your time. I would like, if I could, a brief history lesson, actually, to start with. This is the first drilling in Puntland in 20 years. What has happened in those 20 years? Was it just too dangerous? Did companies have to get out 20 years ago? Tell me the backstory.
Sure. I mean, I think it's, I think most from Westerners can appreciate. I think Black Hawk Down is probably the one incident that people remember which led to an end to sort of like the federal Somalia as was known in the in the 70s and 80s. So with that and the removal of obviously the UN and all the Western forces from Somalia, basically the country was split in three. You had Somaliland basically going back to its traditional tribal origins and being autonomous rule. Obviously Puntland similarly became autonomous, and then you had Mogadishu, which was always a little bit more complicated with the added influx of warlords in the earlier years and the Islamic fundamentalists in the later years. So from Puntland's perspective, it really, I mean, the former President Hersey started the search for partners in the oil and gas and mineral industry at around 2002. And, for the first 3 or 4 years did not have much luck because stability-wise, it was an unknown commodity. Not only that, you still did have a transitional federal government in southern Somalia, so there was confusion as to actually who had the legitimate rights to minerals and hydrocarbons in the area. And I know it's I'm trying not to be facetious, but piracy has actually done Puntland from a perception point of view, where it has done it a lot of credibility and a lot of positiveness in that you have Western governments and the EU and the UN dealing with the Puntland government and recognising that this is a responsible government. And it can be dealt with as the legitimate ruler of Puntland.
And so you get to this drilling stage now, the pointy end of things, if you like, but you as a company have been there for 7 years already. With all the research and testing you've no doubt done in that time, how confident are you about the real oil prospects here? We know there's a lot. Tell me about short and long term and really how much you can get out of this.
Well, I mean, we're incredibly confident, and I think, again, sorry for going back to an historical lesson, but originally when the Hunt brothers found oil in Yemen in the early 80s, everyone started looking at their geological field maps, and what was established is that the two producing basins in Yemen, which I think to date have produced anywhere from 3 to 4 billion barrels, are replicated geologically in Puntland. So the Nugal and Daror Valley are geological replicas, if you'd like, mirror images of what we found, what was found in Yemen. Very few people have ever doubted the significance of a hydrocarbon basin in Puntland, in those two basins, and obviously we're very hopeful that the discoveries will be made sooner rather than later.
Peter, let's talk about the business itself. As I'm sure you're all too aware of, oil companies, wherever they go, whatever they do, they will inevitably come under the spotlight or be accused of coming in and taking the money and running. What is Range doing to make sure that you do give back adequately to the Puntland region?
Okay, I mean, it's a very good question. I think it all started from day one, both in terms of not only with the PSA, or we originally had a contract of work terms, as well as which provided for monthly payments to the government, direct to the government since we've been there, monthly payments have been made, which have gone into infrastructure predominantly. That is always a standard in terms of government payments, instead of upfront payments, which you'll find with sign-on bonuses in Angola, Nigeria. Our sign-on bonuses were monthly originally. And now moving into the drilling development phase, there are a number of features of the PSA. Obviously, an off-the-top royalty goes to the government, anywhere from 4 to 12% of revenue based on daily production. You have a 50-50 profit split with regards to after cost recovery, with regards to going to the government, and then more importantly, because people will say, well, what about in the years leading up to production? You have basically exploration taxes, which is quite unusual, where the operator pays, I think it's around 3 or 4% to the government based on money spent into the ground, as well as then the obligations with regard to using local workforce, local tenders with regards to any of your operations in country. So there is a really multi-tiered approach, and I think, the days of the accusations that oil companies will just go in and rape and pillage and leave nothing behind. I think the world's probably a bit too transparent nowadays for that to happen. The one good thing about oil and oil exploration is because of ultimately the potential, especially in Puntland with multi-billion barrel reservoir systems, there is certainly enough to be shared and to go round. And so for that reason, we're very comfortable that we've never been accused of potentially just going in and ignoring what's happening in country. And even with this current program, I think we've already done 9. I think there's another 9 that we're going to do, community development projects relating to water wells, obviously health, education, as part of this drilling program itself.
And that program includes, or does it include, should I say, training up the locals? Invariably, all operations in Africa and here in the Middle East as well, they involve a lot of expat expertise, being brought in. Is there a long-term plan to get the region not entirely self-sufficient, but supporting itself to a degree?
Yeah, I mean, there is, but I'm not going to I can't be naive and say that the training is happening now, because ultimately there isn't scope for training when you're in a an exploration phase. The opportunity in the exploration phase is obviously directly related to logistics and security, but the PSAs themselves actually mandate the operator, which us and Horn Petroleum, to provide longer-term training programs. Now, in the initial stage, that would involve more relating to the government and the actual ministry itself. But moving forward, clearly with the discovery, that is when those training programs will definitely kick in, and obviously we would see a much bigger beneficial stage to the government and the people upon a commercial discovery being made.
That is Peter Lander from Range Resources in Western Australia. Great talking to you, Peter. Thank you.
Kamal, thanks for the opportunity.
And there's plenty more still ahead on Counting the Cost. We're in Kabul, Miami, London, as well as the Indian slum the government wants to tear down, and why many feel Mumbai's economic heart could be torn out.